I was watching last night, Chris Wynn household, watching a little bit of The Last Dance. Again, if you don't know what The Last Dance is, it's a documentary on the Chicago Bulls in the 90s. A lot goes into Michael Jordan, and they were talking about, listen, a lot of the stuff I found interesting. I thought it was very good yesterday, and we can get into the USA basketball practices and stuff, but I want to start with Michael Jordan because the part that I found very interesting, it's nothing I didn't already know, but if you recall, when Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls in the playoffs were playing, I believe it was it the New York Knicks?
Yes.
And the night before a playoff game, I guess Michael Jordan claimed, and his father claimed, that, he was going through a lot of the stresses of being a professional basketball player and, winning a playoff series, and I think they were down 1-0, and they had a game the next day against the Knicks. So Jordan decides to go with his dad to Atlantic City, which is, by the way, not a short drive. It's at least a few hours. He goes there in the afternoon. Reports are he didn't even get back until 2 a.m. Now, he said on the ESPN documentary yesterday he got back at midnight, when all reports said he was still in the casinos at that time. And his defense was not that he was a compulsive gambler or that it was selfish. His defense was that he did that to get his mind off things. Now, look, he could have gone with his dad and taken a drive somewhere to get your mind off. You don't have to play blackjack and gamble. And he was asked, Michael, do you think you're a compulsive gambler? And he said, no, I have a problem when it comes to competition, but not gambling. Well, that's exactly what gambling is. It's competition. Did you win? Did you lose? So, yes, I do think throughout his life, Michael Jordan has had a gambling problem. And, there have been books written about this. They also went into all the money he lost on the golf course. He would gamble everywhere he went. And I think it was part of how he's such a competitive person. Some of the most competitive people I know love to gamble. I'm one of them. But Michael took it to another level, and he let his work get in the way of gambling. He did. Even though he's the best basketball player of all time, he lost that game too. A lot of people felt like he didn't have sufficient sleep, and going to Atlantic City certainly was a selfish move. I completely agree with that. Michael disagrees, and I think Michael talked a lot about the media, about how he wouldn't talk to the media because they were asking him so many questions about his gambling. He did it to himself. The night before a playoff game, you don't drive to Atlantic City and gamble all night. It's not something that we would call professional. And it's no different than me if I decided to gamble until 3, 4 in the morning and then it'd be on the radio at 9 a.m. You can't do that. It's unprofessional. And if I did do that, I would say, you know what? It was a mistake. I was wrong, and I shouldn't have done it, and I shouldn't do it again. But Michael has always defended and listen, he said he's not perfect, but this is a guy with a tremendous ego that he wouldn't even do this documentary unless he had the final say on every single subject. And then they went into Isaiah Thomas and the Dream Team. Nobody can look me in the eye and say Isaiah Thomas should not have been on that team. Isaiah should have been, as great of a point guard John Stockton was, Isaiah Thomas should have been on this team. Christian Laettner should not have been on the team. Okay, Michael Jordan, it was told, asked who's going to be on this team. And the response he got was, I know who you're talking about. He won't be on the team. I believe Michael Jordan gave them an ultimatum. It's either Isaiah or me. If Isaiah Thomas was on that team, I could almost guarantee you Michael Jordan would not have been on the Dream Team. But the man doesn't own up to anything. He doesn't own up to anything. He doesn't own up to the gambling issues he had in his life that have controlled his life, by the way. And he hasn't owned up to that Dream Team situation, which was selfish on his part. I have a huge problem with that.
Who were the guards on that team, Brian? Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, who else? Who were the backups?
John Stockton. We're talking about John Stockton.
Guard.
That's the person.
John Stockton was the one that got the spot instead of Isaiah.
Which is inexcusable.
Which is why the debate's been for 30 years.
Is it?
Why John Stockton over Isaiah Thomas? And it's not even a comparison.
It's not
at that
a
point
comparison.
in 1992.
Who was the better defender?
Isaiah Thomas. JD. He's
not
the second
even a debate.
best
guard in the
Isaiah
history of the
Thomas
NBA.
Is unbelievable. Yeah, at the time, it is a preposterous argument whether or not who's better, John Stockton or Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah was clearly better than John Stockton.
Here's what speaks volumes. Michael Jordan was asked that same question. Guess who he said was the best point guard ever to play the game and the second best point guard? He said Magic Johnson, and then he said,
Isaiah
not
Thomas,
John
right
Stockton, Isaiah Thomas. If you're Michael Jordan, you have to put your personal feelings aside for the sake of the country. Okay? Jordan,
well, it's not necessarily, but Brian, I'll push back a little bit on that. It's not necessarily for the sake of the country.
Well,
it's for
representing
the
the
fact
States.
that he should have been on that squad. It was the Dream Team for a reason, right? You're putting together the 12 best guys as basketball players,
and
in
Isaiah
the world.
should have been there.
And obviously Christian Laettner was the one college guy
that
they put on there. But putting on John Stockton instead of Isaiah, it is absolutely a clear slight to Isaiah Thomas as a basketball
And I'll give
player.
you another
Or they thought that Stockton offered a different element to the
not
team
why,
that
that wasn't the reasoning,
Thomas
though,
didn't
JD.
offer,
That's
or
not the
could
reasoning
not
used,
offer.
though.
Or they were worried about continuity for whatever reason as well.
I'm telling you, that's
another
case.
Another not reason
again,
why they did
you
it.
want to make sure the team can get along.
JD, that's not why.
Okay,
I'm telling you,
I'm just
that's
saying.
not why.
Stockton
Isaiah had played with Michael Jordan and Pippen on numerous All-Star teams. There's been other situations where they've been together. That wasn't it. It was a situation, as Brian pointed out, where they and by the way, this was an interesting point that came up in the episode yesterday. Is the whole way that Michael Jordan has addressed that situation with
like it
Isaiah
or
and the
not,
Dream Team.
Stockton,
That's why it was
Stockton
a point.
leads. I mean, he's the NBA assist per game leader lifetime.
JD,
he has the most assists. He has the most steals lifetime. Now, had they put like a Mark Price on there,
You're right.
That would make sense.
But
I mean, John Stockton over Isaiah Thomas. There's probably a disparity, but it's not a major disparity.
JD, there is a major disparity. This was 1991 when they put the team together. It was the 92 Dream Team. You're talking about stats as far as them being Hall of Fame players now. Even now, though, making the argument that John Stockton's better than Isaiah Thomas, I think is ridiculous.
Listen, I'll say it again.
Isaiah's a better basketball player.
This is what speaks volumes. I'll say it again.
Period.
Jordan said that Isaiah Thomas, the second best point guard of all time, right behind Magic Johnson. By the way, I'll give you another example of where Michael Jordan sold his ridiculous selfishness. Speaks to me the character of him. Is he the best player of all time? Absolutely. But when they had these USA basketball jerseys made, and Reebok, by the way, paid millions of dollars for them to wear those jerseys. And because Jordan had an issue with Reebok, because Reebok didn't take him, it was Nike that he went to. And by the way, he was a crybaby. He didn't want to even get into a plane and talk to Nike, who was going to offer him a huge deal. Jordan didn't even want to get in the plane, like just a spoiled crybaby. And Adidas, didn't want to make a shoe for him. Adidas sponsored these USA basketball jerseys, and Jordan said he didn't want to show the emblem of I'm sorry, I said Reebok, not Adidas. That was my mistake. Thank you. That was my mistake. He wanted to cover it up when they accepted the gold medal. He refused to show it. He put the American flag over it, not because he wanted to be a patriot, because he wanted to do something to cover the emblem. I just think that, and by the way, they showed it. They showed him saying what he was going to do. He did it on purpose. It's just so childish, man. Yes, is he the best player of all time? Yes, by far, on both ends of the basketball court. No question, hands down. But I'm sorry. It's the story that we talked about a little bit off the air. He was a lifetime horrible tipper. I love that Wayne Gretzky story where Gretzky's gambling with Jordan in Vegas. He gets a cocktail and Jordan tips him $5. And then Gretzky takes the $5 and gives the waitress a $100 chip and says, Michael, that's how we tip in Vegas. I've heard stories of Larry Bird doing the exact same thing when he was hanging out with Michael in Vegas. Him and no tip and Pippen. It's like the valet people, they just squirm away and they leave when they see one of their cars drive up there. Them and Pete Sampras and Tiger Woods, some of the cheapest professional athletes of all time. And these are guys that have tons and tons of money. And by the way, it was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar that said it best in describing Michael Jordan, the human being. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar said, Michael Jordan, his whole life, has cared more about Nike products than he's cared about humanitarian issues. Now, Michael Jordan is no criminal. I'm not saying that he's a murderer or a felon or, any of that stuff. What I am saying is that Michael Jordan off the basketball court, not a very nice guy.
Do you think that he got his father killed?
Listen, I hate to speculate on stuff like that. Obviously, the answer is I don't know. But it is a possibility. I would not rule it out. Let's put it with the gambling, things that he went through in his life. I'm saying it's not out of the realm of possibility. I'll tell you which is else not a realm of possibility. When he took a year off from the NBA, and I think they're going to cover this, next week. When he took a year off from the NBA, we know that Michael Jordan and David Stern, the late David Stern, had a fantastic relationship. They just connected with each other. They had a great relationship. David Stern knew that Michael Jordan was the NBA. He was the NBA. He was it. He was the poster child. And I believe Michael Jordan, with the gambling problem that he had and the debts that he had, and by the way, he was connected to some really bad people. They talked about it yesterday on the show. I believe that it was gambling related, that Michael Jordan bet on his own games. That's what I believe based on information that I've heard, some very good sources that were in the NBA at that time and those that were on the bench. I believe that David Stern told Michael Jordan, take a year away from the game, get your you-know-what together. And that's why Jordan went to baseball. That's what I think.
Do you think he bet against himself or on himself?
Well, I'll tell you
this. That's a tough question to answer.
It's a Pete Rose question.
I'll tell you this. There's a game in '95 that Jordan played. and I've seen the footage of it. I think you could find it on YouTube. I believe it was against the Utah Jazz. I think they were favored by like 5.5 or 6 or something. And Jordan was at the free throw line. He missed 8 out of 10 free throws in the final minute of that game. The Bulls won the game, but they did not cover. And there are a lot of people that are speculating that in that game in 1995, or 95, he was taking book.
Right.
I don't know if that's true or not. But I don't think it was a coincidence that Jordan just left the game for a year. I think he was in cahoots with David Stern. We'll probably never know the truth. But I'm telling you right now, the guy just doesn't win 3 NBA championships. You know what? I'm going to leave now. It just doesn't make any sense.
In cahoots, as in Stern was betting with him?
No, that's not what I meant.
Or Stern was cognizant of it.
No, I never.
Stern knew what was going on.
No, I don't think that's
for a long time.
Yeah, I don't think that's Stern bet on games. What I do think is that Stern knew what was going on.
Okay.
I think it was some sort of disciplinary measure. Look. If this news came out and Stern had to announce a suspension or something, it would ruin basketball. It would really hurt the game. He knew that. Jordan knew that. And I think they came to some sort of behind closed doors agreement. I really do.
I don't think there's any question, Brian, that they're going to address it in the next episode as to the reasoning why Jordan retired. There's no doubt about it. You can't get around it. There's no way. But back to the point you were making as far as Jordan, when he addressed whether or not he had a gambling problem, I found it a little bit disingenuous on his part because he brought up the reasoning as if it's how much money that you have in the bank, right, or how much that you're worth. You know, hey, I'm not homeless, right? I didn't, blow all my money. I'm not completely broke, as if that's like some kind of, that's some kind of indication as to whether or not you have a gambling problem, how much money that you're worth or what your bank account size is. That is in no way will tell you whether or not somebody has an issue when it comes to gambling at all. And he brought that up as if it was like the only reason why you would think he had a problem.
I would push back on that. If you have $20,000 in your bank account and you gamble $18,000 away, you have a much bigger problem than someone who has $15 million in their bank account and they gamble $300,000 away. They just do it in higher increments. I mean, if you put yourself,
it's all relative.
If you put yourself in a position
it's all relative.
Where you don't have a house, or that it's affecting your life or your livelihood or your family or the shelter that you can provide for the people that you have to care for, then I think that you have a much then the problem is larger under those circumstances.
But it's not.
And Michael Jordan never did that because he made so much money that he really couldn't do that.
I'll take it a step further. It wasn't just about money. It affected his job. There's no question at times.
The guy won 6 rings.
Okay, but he could win 100 rings. It still affected his performance that night when he went to Atlantic City. He had a horrible game in Game 2. All it has to be is one for you to say, it affected my job, maybe I have a problem. There is no doubt Michael Jordan had and has a gambling problem. Now, he was also a nut. Now, to be great in your profession, no matter what you do, you have to be a little crazy and obsessed.
He's a total eccentric.
Michael Jordan would play his poker games in the back of the plane, and all the time, every game, for thousands of dollars. But the funny story was, Bill Wennington and John Paxton and some of these guys that didn't have the Michael Jordan money or Scottie Pippen money would be playing dollar blackjack in the front of the plane. Dollar blackjack. And Jordan would walk past them and say, hey, what are you guys playing? Can I play with you? And then they would look at him and be like, why do you want to play with us for? We're only playing $1 a hand. We're effing around. And Jordan says, no, I want to play with you guys. They would say, why? And his response to them was, because I want your money in my pocket.
And that's actually a hilarious response, by the way.
And
I can appreciate that.
And that goes to show you, like a Kobe Bryant, like a Wayne
Mm-hmm.
Gretzky, like any of the best in their profession, it doesn't matter what sport or who you are, even the best in the poker world, Phil Hellmuth, for example.
Right.
You have to be unbelievably psychotic when it comes to competition and winning. They showed footage of him flipping coins against a wall at the Delta Center, I believe. Or United Center, I apologize. And this is a security guy who's probably making $15 an hour, and he's back in the locker room with Jordan before the game, and they're flipping coins for God knows what kind of money. And you could see how pissed off Jordan was getting because this guy kept beating him. And Charles Barkley said Jordan was the guy. It didn't matter how much money he was down. He would play all night until he at least got back to even. That's exactly the kind of gambler that a casino wants in there, a guy that needs to get back even. I can't even imagine how much money Michael Jordan has lost gambling in his career, but I would say hundreds of millions of dollars. John Daly lost like $60 million. So if you know John Daly lost that much, Jordan's probably lost hundreds of millions of dollars gambling.
Yeah, Brian, you pointed out, of course, he went to Atlantic City. That wasn't the reason that he was getting so much media attention. It was because of the books that were put out by the guy that I think he was in L.A. that he was playing golf with. with, where he allegedly owed over $1.2 million to. That situation. There was also another book or there was another situation that basically it stirred up the media where it was directly affecting Michael Jordan.
There was a
guy
that was involved in drugs, and a guy that has been arrested before that he was involved with. This guy was like a golf hustler. I forgot his name, and they talked about that on the show yesterday.
Yeah, you owed him $57,000 or something.
So
right?
Jordan lied. He wrote in this check for $57,000, and when asked about it, he said, that was because I forgot the excuse he made, but he didn't mention gambling. And then when he was in court and he had to, go under oath, he said it was a gambling debt. And when asked, well, Michael, why did you lie about it? He said because to get away from the embarrassment of it. This guy has written many of people checks for gambling debts. There's no doubt he was and still is a compulsive gambler. But you know what? We all have our issues. We all have our problems. But when you let it affect your job and your teammates, I think that's an issue. I mean, we heard, got into brawls with Bill Cartwright in practice. He got into brawls with Will Perdue. Steve
Kerr and him used to get into it all the time. Yeah.
And I don't have as big of a problem with that because the guy was so crazy when it came to winning and so competitive. Yeah. I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with the things he did off the court. The way he treated people off the court. And I get it. He was under a microscope. People wanted a piece of him everywhere he goes in public. People wanted an autograph, a picture. I can't even imagine how difficult that must be. But there are certain people that can handle it better than him.
Hey, Brian and JD.
I don't know how you can say that it actually affected his work because he.
No, it did. I'll tell you why.
I mean, he won so many rings. I mean, what you're saying that if he didn't have a gamble,
told you.
I'll tell you why.
But in the end, in sports, what matters? I mean, winning that championship matters. Making the playoffs matters. Actually, achieving something matters. He won what? 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards.
I will respond to that. I already did, but
I get that. But
I have an answer too. By the way,
I would
Brian.
say that.
Go ahead, Chris. Let him respond.
JD, I'll respond to your question. You posed a question. You don't think it affected him?
Chris,
you don't think it affected him?
Unless he thought he was going to ring 10. Unless he thought he was going to win 10
I want to tell
rings.
you why I think it affected him. It affected him because there was this swirl of controversy around him, and he was getting just hounded by the media for a long period of time, and he admitted it on both of the episodes yesterday that it affected his psyche and the way that he dealt with the media and the way that he dealt with his teammates, and it affected his play on the court. Obviously, when you have psychological impact like that, right, where you're dealing with a topic like that and with the media day in and day out, and you're getting barraged, it has an impact on the court.
Let me add
this. It did with him.
As mentally tough as Michael Jordan was, it broke him. It broke him, and for a year, or I believe it was around 8 or 9 months, he didn't do one interview with the media. He ignored the media. He refused to talk to the media because he didn't want to answer questions to his gambling problem. Yeah. I think that speaks volumes. It did affect him, and it certainly affected him in Game 2 versus the New York Knicks because he got back in town late. He obviously probably didn't get a great amount of sleep, and he didn't perform on Game 2. Now, he came back and they won the series, and that gave him, because he was so good and so special, because he was such a great basketball player, any amount of motivation, he would come back. But the point being is that it did affect him.
But I mean, knowing him, he could have just been challenging himself, saying, "We're gonna lose Game 2, and I'm gonna come back."
I don't think he ever intentionally lost the playoff game.
Because I'm so competitive that I want to win. I want to win this series, and if we're down, then that gives me more incentive to play to up my game to actually win that series. Which he did.
I am very confident.
Guys like that are absolutely They are completely insane.
Guys like that want to win 4-0. They want to put your foot. He would never say, "Oh, let's just give the Knicks Game 2, and then we'll go back to Chicago." All of his players say he was the kind of guy that not only wanted to beat you, he wanted to put his foot on your neck. He wanted to win every series 4-0. Trust me, he did not want to go down 2-0 to the New York Knicks. Trust me, he did not have a good game. It certainly affected his performance in that game. Now, how much it affected his career? Still going down as the best basketball player of all time. But with that being said, he was and still is a compulsive gambler.